Howdy, soldiers. I think cuffing clothing is the equivalent of putting your t-shirts in sport mode. Hey, you don't gotta get ready if you stay ready. It is now mid-March, which means it's time to start talking about the annual Trans Rights Readathon. If you haven't heard of it before, this is the third year in a row of this Readathon, where readers are encouraged to seek out books by authors who are trans, gender non-conforming, non-binary, and two-spirit, in order to uplift, amplify, and support both authors that write these books and stories with these characters in them. This is usually a week-long readathon that ends on March 31st, which is the Trans Day of Visibility. But this year, we're switching things up a little bit, and it's going to be from March 21st to March 31st, so a full 10 days instead of the usual 7. Usually creators set up a kind of GoFundMe or fundraiser for a specific purpose or cause, and these are specifically trans-led organizations and fundraisers. And you can donate as much or as little as you like. Some people do like a cent a page, some people do like $5 a book, some people do $20 a book, just however much that you want to donate to your trans community. I personally will be donating $5 for every book that I read, and it's going to go to the Canadian company TransCare Plus. This is a national nonprofit organization that focuses on 2S LGBTQIA+ healthcare and wellness, working with queer and gender diverse communities, care providers, and researchers to help identify, develop, and provide services and resources that meet the needs and desires of queer and gender diverse folks across Canada. I will leave that link below, as well as lots of other links to some of my friends who are doing their own videos on this and their own fundraisers, and I would encourage you to sort through some of the ones that are already up, or even start your own. And as somebody who is an out and proud member of the LGBTQ community, let me just say, there would not be any LGBTQ community without the T. Baby gays, it is not all about kissing girls and going clubbing. Know your history. Pride started as a riot, and the only reason that we have rights that we have now is because of trans women of color. So if anybody comes into this video making disparaging comments against the trans community, I will block you. Now, when it comes to what to read for this readathon, I feel like recommendation videos are popping up left, right, and center by some of my favorite creators as well, but we tend to see a lot of similar titles. Even though we are very loud, the queer community is quite small, and so the trans author bubble is also quite small, so, you know, just comparatively, you're gonna see less of them out in the wild. So whenever you do hear about trans authors, it's a lot of similar names. Like, everyone's heard of Rivers Solomon, everyone's heard of Shelley Parker Chan, everyone knows V.E. Schwab, everyone knows Raka Aoki, people have definitely heard of F.T. Lukens, people have definitely heard of Shirin J. Zhao, and like, who hasn't heard of Aiden Thomas? And if you haven't read any of those authors, I would highly recommend. Oh, and I just dropped something. So in today's video, I want to talk about some of my favorite lesser well-known books by trans and non-binary authors. To keep this video from being 1,000 years long, I have narrowed it down to my top 2 of each category of like the top categories and genres that I read. So this is, you know, specifically tailored to me, but guess what? We're on my channel and you're not my real dad. But if you like gay fantasy shit, baby, you're in the right place. And then I wanted to go over my personal TBR for the week, the 10 days. So without further ado, grab a drink, grab a snack, and buckle in. Join me as we go over recommendations for the Trans Rights Readathon of 2025 and my personal TBR pile. Category is dance or die. Sorry, category is romantasy. Not gonna lie, I mostly made this category so I could talk about vampires. In this household, we support trans rights and trans wrongs, and there's nothing quite like a sexy, villainous vampire novel to really get the party going. I am talking about Mistress of Lies by Cam Enright. In this dark political fantasy romance, we follow Shan, who is the heir of a now disgraced but once great house of blood workers. Sam, a factory worker who finds out he has a special kind of magic that draws him closer to the court of the Vampire King. Royal blood worker and right-hand man to the king, Isaac, who has a sordid history with Shan and his own terrible secret. All three of them are tasked by the Eternal King to help stop a killer cutting a swath through the city, and in so find themselves in a tangled web of revenge and desire. It's dark, it's twisty, it's sexy, it's rotted, it's political, it's bloody, it's cutthroat, and the stakes have never been higher. Pun intended. I am a sucker for a so stupid. I am a fiend for a blood magic dark vampire fantasy book, and this is one of my favorites. Isaac is a trans character and one of our love interests, and he in particular is fascinating as a character, and his transness is just a part of him. It's a part of the story, and we do have some pretty explicit sex scenes in this where we are exploring trans bodies in a way that is just, it's normal and fine, like it should be. This is a dark and deadly threesome that I would like to be a part of, not gonna lie. Is there like a sign-up sheet somewhere? If you're looking for something a little less bloody and a little bit more fantastical, then may I recommend this high political fantasy novel that focuses on magical academies and runaway princes and ripping holes in the fabric of space-time due to fun alchemical inventions, aka what I get up to on Saturdays. It's Reclaimed by Seth Haddon. A trans author with a trans main character, Saba is a scholar of the astral sea, which is kind of like another dimension that's also kind of like heaven, but also kind of like not, who creates this arcane device that accidentally explodes. He accidentally killed a foreign dignitary. So an ambassador comes to town to try him for murder, but then when Zek gets there, he realizes that Saba may have actually been set up, and the two of them enter into this agreement to try and figure out who the real murderer is. I love when fantasy worlds invent real world things. So this book invents fantasy top surgery and fantasy HRT. The story of Saba and his trans journey is not front and center, but because it's a part of him, it is a part of the story. And on the DL, it's actually way more important to the story than you may think after just the first few chapters. No spoilers, but I'm just saying. The whole point of the story is Saba reclaiming himself. He's reclaiming his identity, and he's realizing what he is capable of as himself in this version of himself. You know what romance novels don't do anymore? Yearning. And oh my god, I could power a rocket ship to the moon with just the way that these two look at each other. But I will warn you, this ends on a pretty spicy note, so just, it's a happy one, for sure. Very happy ending, if you know what I'm talking about. And because I think I just want to keep talking about romance, next category is romance. My top 2 romance books by trans and non-binary authors. Did I say at the very beginning that I was only going to do 2 of each? Brain cells? None. I swear the inside of my brain the last couple of days is just that screensaver for like the DVD that just like bounces back all the time and never quite gets into the corner. You know the one I'm talking about. Anyways, next up is the spicy sapphic soiree by Power Thruple, which is Triple Sec by TJ Alexander. Non-binary author with a non-binary character, and throw a couple lesbians in there for good measure. A sweet and sizzling poly rom-com about a jaded bartender who gets taken in by this quirky couple and is trying to re-figure out what she wants in life while also trying to win a cocktail competition. First of all, Mel, our main character, is a freaking smoke show. Like, oh, I'm sorry, a tall, tattooed lesbian with a side shave and beautiful muscled arms who can make you a cocktail of anything that you could want at a moment's notice. Be still my heart. And Bibi and Cade as individual characters are so wonderful, but then also together are just absolutely fantastic. And the way that Mel learns to interact with either of them changes as they kind of all become a throuple and are all falling in love with one another. And it's this beautiful undercurrent of like friendship and support, but then also it's like hella spicy. And something I found a lot with just general is that when people say non-binary, people automatically assume people who were assigned female at birth. But like the whole point of being non-binary is that not everybody who is non-binary was AFAB. And so, you know, we get to play with that a little bit in this. It's funny, it's sexy, it's surprisingly heartwarming, and you're guaranteed to get at least one good cocktail recipe every time you read it. I'm realizing now my other book is also a poly romance book, but what can I say? I like poly romances, they're fun. So if you couldn't tell, I am of the, you know, bisexual variety, and I'm somebody who, I don't really care what you look like. If you're cute, you're cute, you know what I mean? So maybe that's more like pan or queer or whatever, but I'm going with bi. I look best in the bi flag colors, okay? I don't care what your gender is. All I want to do is kiss some really cute people. And if you're in the same mindset as Marcus Harwood Jones, then you should definitely pick up this adorable poly rom-com. Another non-binary author writing a non-binary character, Charlie, who is absolutely burned out at their dead-end job. But when they have an opportunity to run a piece outside the city, they jump at the chance. They're going to stay at this cute Airbnb. And then once they get there, the family that owns that house is still there because they mixed up some dates. And then a snowstorm comes and just snows all of them in. Buffy, Hayden, and their daughter are this absolutely chaotic, warm, loving family, and they welcome Charlie right into their lives, and maybe for longer than it takes to set out a snowstorm. Hayden's trans, Buffy's queer, their little community that they have is exceptionally queer. There's an amazing drag queen character in here and a very gay church. This draws attention to what a lot of queer people are always hoping for, which is family, right? And being able to have a partner and have a child and have a home, just like any other traditional marriage, quote unquote. This really embodies the warmth and the comfort of domestic bliss, but then also this enveloping acceptance of the rest of the queer community. And yet again, some very spicy scenes that do go into what it's like to have physical intimacy with people who have different types of bodies. Also, if you're like me and or Charlie and are just one continuous ball of stress, this book has no conflict. Like, hello? Like, zero conflict, I swear. It's great. So from romantasy, we went to romance. So now we gotta, you know, DJ run that back and go to what I'm calling just fantasy. Hey, you know how last year everyone was like, ooh, dragon books. And then we were like, where are all the gay ones? Dragonfall by L.R. Lamb. May I introduce you? A queer normative high fantasy full of heists, alchemy, and dragon shifters. A non-binary author with a non-binary trans main character. Arcady is a thief hoping to get enough money to enter into a prestigious alchemy academy when one day he steals something that accidentally leads to like a hole in the fabric of space-time where dragons were thousands of years ago banished to another world, but this accidentally opened up that world and called one through. Everin is the last male dragon of his dying world, and when he gets pulled through this magical rift, he finds out that in order to regain his powers and restore dragons to their former glory, he's going to have to kill the person that summoned him. And the gender fuckery in this world is particularly fun because in a queer normative society, how do you tell people apart? So people are distinguish themselves by title or by gender or by hierarchy, by hand gestures and sign language, but also by certain adornments. So like certain colors of pin or like certain textures of fabric. Poor Everin, he gets there and everyone's like, so how do you identify? And he's like, dragon. And you do feel this weird sympathy for these monsters of legend who were once banished and like are actively dying. But at the same time, I'm like, girl, I want to keep my world in one piece. So maybe we like shouldn't open that rift in space-time. I don't know, just a thought. The juxtaposition of new magic versus old magic versus even older magic is really cool when you see the way that both societies have adapted and like how the legends have changed over the years, and some of the most unique dragon lore and dragon magic that I've ever read. So I would highly recommend this if you haven't picked it up already. And if you're already somebody who read She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan or really love The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang, that you are going to love this next East Asian war fantasy inspired book. Inspired by classical Chinese martial arts literature, The Water Outlaws by S.L. Wong is a fast-paced, action-packed novel with bandits of ungovernable gender. After dedicating her life to being the weapons expert of the Emperor, Lin Chong finds herself suddenly exiled after she denies a powerful man. Tattooed, thrown from the palace, and left for dead, Lin Chong finds herself taken up by a group of outlaws called the Bandits of Liangshan, and apologies for poor pronunciation, who are a group of women and gender nonconforming warriors who are fighting back against the upper classes for a sense of justice for women and the lower classes. Full of magic, mayhem, and murder, we have a sapphic Robin Hood-esque fantasy that really shows that kicking ass has no gender. A non-binary author with many non-binary and trans characters. If you're a lover of an ensemble cast or a bunch of anti-heroes, then this is the book for you. I will warn you now, because this is a historical-based book, there are many difficult themes to read as a woman, as somebody who was raised as a woman in society. However, it is also about that group of people rising up and taking back their power, taking back their autonomy, and honestly, working smarter, not harder. Saying a bunch of women and trans folks and gender nonconforming people rising up to take over the tyrannical government seems pretty good right about now. Everybody grab a sword, we're gonna go to brunch, and then we're rising up against the government. Okay, now we're gonna talk about sci-fi stuff. The first sci-fi book is a story that I found last year that I absolutely adored, and it is this violently pink copy of August Kitco and the Mechas from Space by Alex White. When an army of giant AI robot mechs descends on Earth, humanity thinks that they're screwed, except one musician named Gus who forms an odd alliance with one of these mechs, and it turns out that there's actually this like big mech battle across the galaxy, and Earth is one of the last hopes for them. But somebody else swept up in this maelstrom of vanguards is Ardent Violet, the galaxy's hottest rock star, who was flirting with Gus earlier, and then oh hey, guess it turns out that nothing bonds you quite like fighting an intergalactic war along with semi-sentient space beasts. It's kind of like if Pacific Rim was like also a disco musical. And non-binary authors featuring non-binary and trans characters, this starts off as kind of a dark comedy and then slowly morphs into something that makes you feel like your chest got cracked open. It turns into this really sad, beautiful look at the morality of infinity. Because even though we get mech bots and space battles and pew pew lasers, at the core of it, it's about humanity and how we've wronged one another, how human life is full of mistakes and regret, and how we have to band together to fight to keep ourselves alive. The softer thread of that being between Gus and Ardent, because Gus kind of feels responsible for like the fate of the little known universe. Absolutely beautiful writing, very fun and deeply relatable characters, and a takeaway that if humanity is going to go through a bleak ending, then goddamn we are gonna have some sick as hell guitar riffs to be our end solo. This is a duology, and I have got to buy the sequel. This sci-fi novel is a little bit of a cheat because it's also kind of a fantasy novel, also kind of a dystopian, also kind of a horror novel, and considering it's so teeny tiny, it's quite impressive that it manages to pack such a punch. This non-binary author is absolutely insane for writing a mermaid, Frankenstein, post-apocalyptic magic forest fantasy dystopian book, and it's The Salt Grows Heavy by Cassandra Khaw. I know none of those words made sense, and you gotta trust me, this book doesn't either. In the ashes of a dying world, two unlikely companions, a once sort of mermaid and a once sort of plague doctor, decide to become travel companions and accidentally wander into a forest dark and deep, where they discover something much more sinister is afoot. This sounds like the setup of a bad joke, like a mermaid, a plague doctor, and a creepy cult leader from the middle of the forest transforming people into Frankenstein monsters walk into a bar. Technically, every character in this book is trans, because there are many transformations, if you will. This teeny tiny terrifying tale absolutely oozes with dread and just this creeping sense of unease and just ew, but also literally and metaphorically shedding your past self in order to live a life that better suits you and finding people to bring into your life as part of your found family. And last of my recommendations, I'm also kind of cheating because this isn't really like a genre, this is an age band, but I want to talk about two of my favorite YA books by trans and non-binary authors. I feel like these are probably the most well-known of anybody on this list, but like, there's something wrong with me if I don't talk about them. For example, Hell Followed With Us by Andrew Joseph White actually might be my favorite trans book by a trans author, now that I'm thinking about it. End of the world cults creating megaviruses that turn you into body horror angels. Ooh, that's my shit right there. Quick side note before we start talking about this, I want to give trans YA books their time to shine because like, their trans kids exist too. Whether you know since you were 5 years old or you figured it out at 60, people still deserve to see themselves represented places, and particularly with kids who are queer or teenagers who are growing up and realizing that they're not like their peers, they deserve to have books that show people like them in positive lights. I'm under the belief that you can talk to any age group about any topic as long as you do it in an appropriate manner using language and concepts that they will understand. That being said, let's talk about dark angels and religious trauma. 16-year-old trans boy Benji is on the run from the cult that raised him, who are also the cult that released a bioweapon virus on the earth that is turning people into monsters of biblical proportions. Benji eventually comes across and is rescued by a group of LGBTQ teens, but he's also hiding the fact that he was infected before he left. But there are more secrets hiding amongst this organization, and yet everyone has to work together in order to stop the cult from releasing their greatest weapon yet. If you're not into body horror, oh baby, you might want to skip this one because this book is nasty and I love it. Now, I did not grow up religious, so I do not have the same visceral reaction to some of the things that happen in this book, but there are big themes of religious trauma and, you know, oppression, as well as belief and changing what you believe in. But what I also love about this is it truly does feel like a real group of teenagers at the end of the world, fucking around and finding out. It's the end of the world, everybody's off their medications and hormones are running high. Like, we are going to make some mistakes. And last but certainly not least is a book that I've just finished that I now think is going to be my new personality for the next couple of months. YA dystopians are back, baby, and I would say that Ava Reid is single-handedly reviving the genre. It's Fable for the End of the World. A sapphic dystopian eco-crime thriller romance novel in the vein of The Hunger Games and The Last of Us. In this future Earth ruined by eco-terrorism and corporatocracy, The Lamb's Gauntlet is a live assassination spectacle that is live streamed everywhere. And our main characters are Anissa, who is given up by her mother to be the next Lamb in order to pay off her mother's debts, and Melino, who is the assassin sent to kill her. But after the countdown begins, a series of events push them together and cut off Melino from her corporate overlords, and the two of them have to survive the wilds together, but also are trying to plan an escape while falling in love. A non-binary author writing sapphic characters, we have post-apocalyptic murder competitions, we got mutated creatures in the wilds, and we got sapphic enemies to lovers. I talked quite a bit about this in my last video, which was my February wrap-up, so you can go see my full thoughts on it there. But I really, really loved this story. Melino and Anissa bounce off each other so well. They have such a good depth to their relationship. And I mean, hey, get you a girlfriend that can blow up a cabin and then kiss about it. Melino's story in particular is way more fucked up than maybe you would expect in a YA book, which is also why I think this is a good representation of YA, where, like earlier we talked about supporting trans rights and trans wrongs. I think we should be able, the queer community at large, should be able to see ourselves in a variety of roles. So it's not just the like coming out books and the like feel good, like rise against adversity, contemporary romance novels, we have the gritty dystopians, and we have the high epic fantasies, and we have the like weird sci-fis where we can see each other in a variety of roles. I'm a diehard Ava Reed stan. I have all of their books, and this is just the latest one, so I thought I'd talk about this. But you can't really go wrong with any of their backlist. Now that I've gotten out all those recommendations, let's talk about what's on my personal TBR for the Readathon this year. I have 4 books, count them, 4 books on my TBR for this time around. I'm not sure if I'll be able to read all of them, but it's nice to have extra on deck. First off is a YA novel, and it is Godly Heathens by H.E. Edgman, who is a trans author writing about a non-binary teen who finds out that they're a reincarnation of a god from another dimension. He's also the author of The Witch King, which is another gritty urban YA fantasy that I enjoyed well enough, but I hear really fantastic things about this. Also, a goal of mine for 2025 was to read a full duology, so I do have the sequel, Merciless Saviors, on my TBR pile. And then I'm also keen to try this Regency romance comedy of errors called Trouble by non-binary author Lex Croucher, where Emily takes her sister's place as a governess to this wealthy household when her sister gets sick, and she thinks that she's just gonna go there and like steal some stuff because she like doesn't like kids and doesn't know how to teach people anything, but then ends up having to stay and then gets involved in this like wealthy family's family drama. It's giving big If Jane Eyre was a rom-com energy. And then an epic high fantasy that I've had people yelling at me to read since it came out is The Unbroken by C.L. Clarke. This was part of the original sapphic trifecta of TikTok, however many years ago that was. Time isn't real anymore, where a soldier and a turncoat have to work together to stop a war and usurp a king from his throne, and then also they're gay about it. But she's a big girl, which means that she's intimidating. And this is the year that I want to stop being intimidated by big books. And number 4 is yet again another sapphic story by a non-binary author, and that is Brighter Than Scale, Swifter Than Flame by Neon Yang. So this novella doesn't actually come out till May, but I got an advance copy of it, and I'm really freaking excited. An oathbound hero reminiscent of The Mandalorian and an Asian-inspired epic fantasy for fans of She Who Became the Sun that is a queer novella about a dragon hunter finding home with the Dragon Queen. I've heard it said this is the year of the Lady Knight, and I'm so into it. Give more women swords! Considering I've been in a little bit of a reading slump this month, my main goal is 2. In 10 days, I think that's possible. And then possibly 3, maybe 3.5. I don't know. Oh my God, the possibilities, they're endless. And finally that. Is that on that? I feel like I've been talking for 6 straight hours. There are 12, but also kind of 16 recommendations for you to read for the Trans Rights Readathon in 2025. Once again, this is March 21st to 31st, so please join in whether you officially sign up or not, whether you're a part of the queer community or not. Like, we should always look to be diversifying our reading, right? Because like books are a way to connect and find community and in our shared love of stories. It's both to see ourselves and see what we could be, and with the absolutely appalling current state of trans rights, we all need to come together as allies in order to protect a pillar of our community. As always, and especially now, please leave down below your recommendations or your reading list of what you're going to be reading for the Trans Rights Readathon. This year, I'm going in as a woman with a plan. I have my books set aside. I have time that I've booked off specifically in my own schedule to like have an evening to read. And considering that I will also be traveling within some of those days, it's gonna be great. I'll be on like a bus and like in a car, and I'll be like, great, take me where I need to be. I'll be in the back reading about ladies with swords. You know where to click to like the video. You know where to click to subscribe. I hope you guys are all having a nice day wherever you are, and I will see you all next week. Bye!